creeping towards the
One year away.
creeping towards
Are we 1 year
victory
today?
here.
I think it's.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, 2.5 chapters basically. So
That
so
might
we
be-
are in chapter 26, verse 24. I think is where
At
we
this
left
point,
off. Is
just this
that right to you?
That's
So we stopped right in the middle of Paul's sermon slash address slash defense slash evangelizing of Agrippa. So King Agrippa and his wife are there as the kind of the Jewish king and queen over this region. They're one of the Herodians, this family that kind of is permitted to rule under the Roman authority as a way of kind of helping the Romans kind of grease the skids with the Jews. The Romans will eventually in year 70, we're get rid of the Herodians, and this is coming up because we're in about we're in the mid 50s right now. We're close to year 60. So if not year 60, so the time is coming short for the Herodians, but but there's a new sheriff in town. There's the new proconsul, and so Agrippa and his wife have come to kind of pay their respects to the new proconsul, and he says, "Oh, by the way, I have this problem with this guy Paul. I inherited him from Felix, my predecessor, and I don't know what to do with him. So, you understand the law better. I've got to recommend him to the emperor because he wants to go to the emperor and be seen by him. But I don't really have any charges for him under Roman law. So maybe you understand the situation better. I don't understand what all these basically internecine Hebrew problems seem to be. And so maybe you can help me sort this out." And Agrippa, and so they have this big pomp and circumstance moment where they kind of blow all the bugles, and Agrippa comes in, and Paul begins to tell his story, and he goes through with all of the eloquence and the entertainment value that you would expect from a high orator. Paul leans into it. He tells the story of his own conversion. And that he is simply continuing to be faithful in the line of Moses and the prophets. That I'm just doing what anybody should be doing because of the first because that the Messiah must suffer, and that by being the first to rise from the dead, he would proclaim light to both the people and the Gentiles. So this was always the messianic promise that when the Messiah comes, it won't just be for the Jewish people, it will be for all people. That it will be for the Jews first, and then it will kind of spill out into the Gentiles. And that has always been a part of the messianic prophecies of and Paul has come, as we all know, to see this in Jesus. Like, clearly Jesus is the guy. And so I'm just doing what you all should be doing, essentially, by continuing to worship Yahweh as the Messiah in Jesus. And so, however, this little line at the end that has now this is kind of the record scratch moment where we left off. So that by being the first to rise from the dead, he should proclaim light to both people and the Gentiles. Like, see, that's that old school record scratch. Like, wait, what? Whoa! Rise from the dead? Wait, who? How are we getting to the rise from the dead thing? We don't rise from the dead. That's not a thing that we do. So,
but Jesus rose. Jesus caused
Lazarus?
Lazarus to rise from the
oh,
dead.
there were all. I mean, last week's. I mean, Jesus was. People were rising from the dead. I mean, you have. I mean, last week we were in Matthew 3. So early on in the Gospels, you have when John is in. If you remember last week's Gospel on Sunday, when John is in prison, he sends his disciples out to Jesus, and he says "What have the He says, "Are you the one we should wait? Are you the Messiah, or should we wait for another one?" And Jesus' answer is, Well, I'm not going to answer. I'm not give you a yes or a no. I'm just going to go back and tell John what you've seen. The deaf can hear, the blind can see, the dead are raised. Like, they were raising the dead Jesus was raising the dead way back there. It's
that little girl too. That little girl.
Right. There's Tabitha. There's the resurrection of Tabitha. There's even Peter. Peter resurrects. Brings back from the. So this is a thing that's been happening. But to the Roman ears, this is like, what are you talking about? Like, this is
Right,
crazy
crazy.
town. Like, you're great. Like so. And
the
this.
Romans had a hand in Jesus rising from the dead because the Jews had asked. My memory's bad today. And asked the Roman leaders that they had sent Jesus to the crucifixion. My God, my brain's my memory is
Have a cookie.
They asked him for Jesus' body because they want the Jews asked for Jesus' body because they were going to put him in the tomb, and then the Jews went to him and said, "We want Romans to guard that tomb,
Right.
Because he was going to proclaim that he was risen from the dead, and we don't want that to be able to happen." And it happened anyway because he made him go to sleep,
Right.
so that Jesus could. So all of what I just said has to do with the Romans should remember or have a record or something of the fact that they were a part of Jesus rising from the dead. They were supposed to prevent his release from the tomb.
Right. But for the average Roman, that was 30 years ago, and second, it's like
They don't even care about Jesus.
they don't care. They don't
Yeah.
care about the Hebrews. I mean, they
Yeah.
consider the Hebrews and their conversation about this like you would watching your cat, chase a laser beam. Like, it's like, oh, isn't that cute? Like, they're not really people, and they're not to be taken seriously. Like, and so,
Pontius Pilate, my memory couldn't remember.
Yeah. No. You're absolutely right in the sense that they're participating. They absolutely are a part of the story. But for this new Roman governor that's come in, like, Paul hasn't got to Rome yet in terms of to begin. The growth of the church is just still pretty nascent and pretty tiny, and so they're.
Paul's just proclaiming from this Roman.
Right, exactly, and they don't necessarily they don't care about the story. They haven't bought into the story. And so this is where we pick it up tonight in verse 24. So while he's making this defense, Festus. So remember, Festus he's the new proconsul. He's set Agrippa up to hear this testimony. Festus is just like, he can't even contain himself. Like, this is supposed to be between Paul and Agrippa is supposed to be kind of questioning Paul, but Festus is kind of sitting there with him listening to this. He's like, he can't even contain himself. He's like, what the heck are you talking about? You're out of your mind. You're crazy. You're talking about raising from the dead? A much learning has driven you insane. But Paul said, I am not out of my mind, and most excellent Festus, but I am speaking the sober truth. So there's this moment where, like, that claim to be the first to rise from the dead has just like the Romans are kind of following along, and then all of a sudden the Romans are like, whoa, wait, we're not following that. But to Paul's point, he goes on to say, indeed, the king, he's talking about Agrippa, knows about these things, and to him I speak freely, for I am certain that none of these things has escaped his notice, for this was not done in a corner. So remember, his grandfather is Herod the Great.
Yeah.
So he's got Herod, and so the Herodians have been ruling over this whole Jesus story since the very beginning. Since the birth of Jesus was Herod the Great. That's when you get the slaughter of the innocents was ordered by Herod the Great. So the Herodians, they're tied into this story because they've been worried about Jesus since he was born. They've been worried about Jesus coming onto to supplant them as king.
Right.
So it's like, he's like, I get, Festus, you think I'm nuts because of this, because you don't know the story. But Agrippa knows the story.
Yeah, he knows.
Like, he knows what's been going on.
And in the prophecy, from the Old Testament, it said that he'd rise from the dead and he would bring the Gentiles and the Jews together.
Yes.
So that's not a surprise.
Right.
The fact. And so why are they so offended by it?
Well, because they don't accept that Jesus as the Messiah. Right. If they were to accept that Jesus was the Messiah, then they would be like, okay, because this is it lays it out a couple of places in the prophets. It's Isaiah, and I think even earlier there's a couple of places where it lays out that, you know, he will be a light. He will be a light to all nations. You know, he will be a light. And there's actually I can't remember the chapter and verse right now, but it basically says he'll come first to the Jews, and then then all the Gentiles will come to him. And so the expectation is when the Messiah comes, there'll be this reconciling with the remnant of the Jews, and then that will extend to which is exactly what we've seen throughout the book of Acts, right? Like that's what we saw happen in,
right.
Like it starts with the 12,
Yep.
you know, it starts with these 12 Jewish disciples, and then it goes to Pentecost, where you have Jews and Gentiles, but mostly Jews, because they were all there for the Passover. So that you have this Jewish flock, and then you have the persecution of Stephen. So you have the martyrdom of Stephen, and the crackdown, and then everybody scatters. And when everybody scatters, the church starts to grow in all these Gentile places. And then you get the Ethiopian eunuch, and then you start to get all these other people from that are not a part of the. So then you start. So it's it's this pattern of every time the church gets oppressed, it scatters and it grows among the Gentiles. And Paul ends up having it's not an accident. Paul has the call on the road to Damascus. He doesn't have it in Jerusalem where, I'll just evangelize these other Jews that are sitting around. No, he's in Damascus. He's in the land of the Gentiles so that he can begin his mission right there amongst the Gentiles. And that's how that all unfolds.
Gotcha.
So that pattern has already been laid out. So I do not. So I'm not of my own mind. I am speaking the truth. And indeed, the king and Agrippa knows that what I'm saying is true, because his family for 3 generations now have been worried about Jesus. And to him I'm speaking freely, for I am certain that none of these things has escaped his notice, for this was not done in a corner. Meaning, that the church hasn't been hiding itself from the Herodians since Christmas night, like since Christmas Eve, like they knew about, Christmas Eve 60 years ago. So
I like the next line. King Agrippa, do you believe in the prophets? I know
right.
you do.
I know that you do. Like exactly. Like yep. And Agrippa said to Paul, "Are you so quickly persuading me to become a Christian?" And so Agrippa doesn't deny that he knows this whole story. Notice he doesn't say, "I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy." Like he doesn't understand. Festus is a greater authority than him, and so he's not saying Festus is right. You're crazy.
Yeah.
Which would be an easy out. But he's not saying that. He's saying, "Do you think you're going to persuade me to become a Christian?" Meaning he tips his hand to say, I know everything you're saying, and I know that it's I know that there's truth in it.
The original Herodians weren't Jews either. They were Arabs that were appointed.
Right. Exactly. But they claim to be Jews, but they're not. Right. And they kind of go through they're kind of quasi Jews in that way. They keep the rituals, but they're just, what they really are is a crime syndicate. That's really what they are. It's they're really think of them as gangsters in a way. The Herodian family is as a gangster family kind of ruling over, but they're not really, So they claim to be Jews because that's part of their, Tony Soprano claims to be a Catholic, because they get things out of it, do you think you're quickly persuading me to become a Christian? So Paul replied, and I love this line, whether quickly or not, I pray to God that not only you, but also all who are listening to me today might become such as I am, except for these chains.
Yeah.
You know, Paul's got jokes. Like, this is the thing, is like, we don't, like, it's hard in the text to kind of see it, but you can imagine how this...
He's being cheeky.
Right, he's being cheeky. He's totally being cheeky. Like, it's like, I want you to be as filled with joy, as filled with peace, as filled with the Holy Spirit as I am, except for being locked up. Like, you know,
Right.
like he's making it, he's so, you know, this is one of those things, again, about Paul. He could be advocating for his freedom. He could be advocating for, even for the welfare of the Christian people or of the blossoming Christians. He could be doing all kinds of things to increase his position. But what is he doing? He's evangelizing Agrippa. He's telling the story of the good news and praying for that, and even at his own expense. Like, it's really another beautiful image of Paul's character here.
He's advocating for truth.
Yeah.
Because the truth is God and Jesus.
Yes, right. That's right. You know, and so then the king got up, and with him the governor and Bernice, and those who had been seated with them, and they were, and as they were leaving, they said to one another, "This man isn't doing anything to deserve death and imprisonment." Like, so for all of Festus's desire to find something to pin on him, so that he could write the recommendation to the emperor to say, all right, here are my charges against this guy, or here are the charges against this guy. Festus is left empty-handed.
So my translation is, this man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar.
Yes. Yep. Right. Exactly. And so Agrippa said to Festus, "This man could have been set free had he not appealed." Exactly. So the thing is so again, what do we see? Paul actually throwing himself into the lion's den because he knows that the lions are going to take him. That the shipment of lions is going to Rome.
Is that how he dies? He gets eaten by a lion?
No.
It is.
Well, no, it isn't. It's not how he dies. Yeah.
I
So that's what this movie is about, by the way.
Oh, the one that you sent that
So
I
the
saw?
one, so the movie in that text.
Yeah.
So that the movie is the story from the end of Acts to the end of Paul's life, and it is this interview of Luke going to visit Paul in prison. Now it's fictionalized, but we actually know we actually have a lot of we know how Paul dies.
Right.
We do know what happens to him. We do know we do know some of the facts along the way. We do know some of the stuff that's going on. So it's although it's not scriptural because it's not written in scripture, it's still a great dramatization of kind of what really was playing out in this time from the end of Acts to the end of Paul's life.
Kind of like The Chosen?
What's that?
Kind of like The Chosen?
Kind of like The Chosen. Yeah.
Have you watched The Chosen?
I've watched some
You
of
don't
The
like
Chosen.
The Chosen. I know you don't.
I don't encourage people not to watch The Chosen. I will never say don't watch it, because if it gets you into the spirit,
definitely.
if it gets you into the spirit and you enjoy the following of it, I'll never say don't watch it. Me personally, I struggle watching it because they make, and it's not to say they're not true to scripture, but they make amalgams of stuff, and they bring stuff together that isn't necessarily the way it is. And it's like watching a war movie. Like, it's like, that's not really
That's
good.
not it, yeah.
And it kind of ruins it for me. So
Like, was the oil, like how they made olive oil, was that like made up?
I don't know if I
Yeah.
didn't see that piece, but
So
Like,
John and James' father starts an olive oil business, and that's how they help support Jesus in the ministry.
I don't. Yeah, see, I don't know
Yeah,
that in the
so-
gospel. Yeah, that's yeah. But there's like there's stuff with if you remember a couple years ago or whatever, I did the series on the Seven Marys.
Yeah.
So the Seven Marys, it's kind of it is difficult to tell the players without a scorecard. But some of what they do in The Chosen is they mush the Marys together.
I have noticed that.
Yeah, so there's like a Mary that's doing
Yeah.
3 of the Mary's jobs throughout, and it's like, oh, it's Mary, and it's like, oh, it's Mary. Yeah, but that was a different Mary. Like,
Yeah.
but so they're not. And I get it, because if you were like this
Right.
Mary and that Mary, and you're actually trying to tell the story,
Too long.
it would be too hard. It would be too difficult. It would be too confusing. So I get that they're using devices to tell the story well, and so I would never say don't watch it if you want to get a basic sense of the
Honestly,
story. But there's those things just. Like they sit in my shoe like a
Right.
rock, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's hard for me to watch some of that.
So like
but-
the woman at the well, though, that was something I like there are certain things of it that I was like, I never even knew about that. Or the woman that touches his garment,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Like things like that.
Yeah,
I think
and that like that, I did see that one, and I thought that was really lovely.
They
I thought
did
they
such
did
a
a
good
lovely.
job with
I thought they did a lovely job with
probably
that
my
story.
favorite scene.
Right? Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
some of them that like they do a really lovely, faithful job
Yeah.
with with some
But
of
some
it.
of it is just a little bit mashed together. just
Yeah,
to make
exactly.
sure.
And they're trying to
And
tell
it's
us.
traumatized.
Exactly, and they're trying to tell a story which is
Right.
complicated. You know, like you got 7 characters named
Right.
Mary. What do you do with like
Right.
you can see a screenwriter like, okay, we got to pare this down. Like they're legitimate choices to make when
Right.
you're trying to tell the story. It's just from me and my perspective,
Historian.
I'm like, what's that?
You're like a historian on this.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's kind of my wheelhouse, you know, a
Yeah.
little bit. Like, so it's one of those things there. So I struggle to watch, but I would never say like don't watch it or it's bad or it's really.
Right.
It's just like you have to understand they're making.
It's dramatized.
It's dramatized.
Yeah.
Like, and if you understand that, but there are some really sweet scenes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like I like what they do with. I like the dramatization around Matthew and the tax collector and
I
stuff.
do love
Like
that.
really, because when they say Matthew's a tax collector. Like you don't get what that means
Right.
until like they do a nice job of kind of showing.
Was he autistic? Is there any indication in?
I
the-
have
in
no
the-
idea. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I mean,
Like, is there any indication in the Bible that he had like any kind of?
Who's going in front of me?
yeah. No, I don't.
And that James has a limp or something. Is that in the Bible as well? See, these are the things that I wonder.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But
okay. I
um,
won't ask you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, the thing is, they may have like, oh, James did that one time, and so they may be making a corollary there.
Yeah.
But it may not. It's not like, oh, and James walked with a limp.
And
You know.
dramatized.
Right, and dramatized. Right. So,
Kind of
anyway,
a historical novel to me. I like
Yeah.
historical novels.
exactly. Like, yeah.
I like.
And right, and you can get good history from historical novels, right? Exactly.
Colin McCullough's historical novels. are
Yeah,
all-
like right, and that's if you treat it that way, like and I absolutely like anything that brings you to Bible. I'm not gonna say don't watch
And
it.
it's reached.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's reached all kinds of people.
Same.
It's excited people about reading Bible. I'm like, God bless it. It's doing
Yeah.
great work. It's just
But for you.
for me,
yeah.
like my
Knowledge of
I'm
the
like
Bible.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
like
I get it.
there's pieces of it I just struggle with. So.
All right. Sorry. We went rabbit hole.
All right. So we are, so 27. We're getting there, everybody. So with all my promises, so it's time to send Paul to Rome, and and it's really this last line of chapter 26. This man could have been set free if he hadn't appealed to the emperor. Paul wants to go to Rome to evangelize the emperor. He wants to bring the emperor to Jesus, and this is his way to get there and to get in front of the emperor. So he is basically holding on to his guilt in the legal system in order to ride the legal system to Rome to get access to the emperor. That even the guy that is arresting him says he could go free, but he doesn't want to because he's trying to.
I'm trying to think, after Caesar, prior to Caesar, they had courts. One of the things that comes to Western civilization is the judiciary system. of
Yep,
Rome.
sure.
But now they're saying for the emperor. To
Right.
me, that would be a new case that the emperor actually being the judge. Because
So,
prior
yeah.
to that was not the case.
It was.
When the Senate was in charge, that was not the way it worked.
Yeah, it was not common practice because most people didn't, it's kind of like in craps rolling the hard 7. Like most people didn't want to try to roll the hard 7,
Right.
but it was a part of the legal system that any Roman citizen who was accused of a crime and did not like the outcome of that judgment, they could appeal directly to the emperor. every Roman citizen had that
It
right.
was the Supreme Court of Rome.
Yes, and exactly, that's a good way to put it. The appeal process was he could appeal to the emperor. Now, the vast majority of people did not do that because, like that could go really badly. And you could spend a long time in jail before you finally got to the emperor, if you got to the emperor,
I'm not going to be thrown off the Tarpeian Rock.
Right. It's like there's a lot that could go wrong with the system. But if you felt really vindicated and you felt really right and you felt that it was a case that if you had you had maybe some influence or sway with the emperor, Paul wasn't the only guy to do this. Like it was a practice within the legal system, but it was a rare one.
Yeah.
And so Paul is headed for Rome. 27. And so I finally, after a year of promising it, I did bring a map. So we actually, because this journey of all the 7 journeys, this is actually one that it really becomes impossible to track without. So they're starting out in Caesarea. So they're right down there. So when it was decided that we were to sail for Italy, now notice.
Oh God, it's way up there.
No, so notice what happened. Like, what does it say? When it was decided that who should sail for Italy? We. What does he say back here? That while he was making the defense, Festus exclaimed. So notice this. When Luke fades into the background when Paul is doing something.
Yep.
But when they get shipboard or anytime they're traveling, Luke goes we. So Luke is always reasserting the fact that like I'm there with him,
Yep.
but he goes into reporter mode when it's like he's not saying, like, oh, we were standing in front of Festus. So like,
Right.
no, it was Paul, and I was standing in the back taking notes. Like he was
Yeah.
very clear to me. But when the posse gets together and they go on the road, when they start traveling, and particularly when they're sailing, it's we. So he's always telling the story. So the we is probably Luke, and remember the Macedonians that have been hanging around, the ones
Yeah.
the Greeks that came down.
They started all this.
Yeah, that started. They're part of the ones who started this whole mess in Jerusalem. They're also with him. So these are this little group that's traveling with Paul, and now. So remember, Paul's still under arrest. So they're basically kind of tagging along behind this prisoner, essentially. So when it was decided that we were to sail for Italy, they transferred Paul from some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Okay, so who's Augustus?
The emperor.
Yes, and so Augustan cohort. What does that mean?
Praetorian Guard, maybe.
Yeah,
That is, other than the Praetorian, that's the second. So there's the Praetorian Guard, which is the guard that protects the emperor, and then the first cohort is the Augustan cohort. So they are the Billy Badasses of the entire Roman army. They are the first cohort of the Roman army. So he is a centurion of the first cohort. He is one of the baddest dudes you will find in the Roman army. So. So Julius is not to be trifled with. So embarking on a ship out of Mithraeum that was about to set sail for the ports along the coast of Asia. So the way this would be is this isn't a government transport. This isn't a Roman army ship. This is a merchant ship, and basically Julius has a little charge of prisoners, and he's dragging them down to the dock, and he said, "Hey, where are you going? Where are you going? Okay, you're going towards Rome." So basically hires passage on this ship.
Yep.
And so which also means that Luke and the little retinue with him, they have to buy their own, like government is paying to drag Paul's posse along. Like they have to, like they've got to, so they're having to, so the church is kind of having to support even them in doing their.
And do they have to stop at ports along the way?
Yeah. So right. So Romans never sailed an open ocean. That's in the ancient world. Nobody did. You didn't sail. They were close to so that if bad weather, their ships really couldn't handle bad weather. So if bad weather came up, they would run to shore and run into port. So they would basically hop, as you see here. They're hopping around the Mediterranean and the Adriatic until they'll get to Rome.
That's the one voice that complete the Malta though.
Yes, that's the, and this is like the adventure part of the entire, like it really. One of the thing about Acts is, and I don't know if it's ever, like, I'm sure there are movies that portray the whole story of Acts, but I don't know how well they've been done, because this really is like the culminating, exciting tale at the end of a long, like, already we've had all these exciting things, like dead beaten, great oratory, like people converted, people martyred, dead, all this kind of stuff. But now we get this sea voyage of like epic proportions.
Because the climax is when he's supposed to go in front of Caesar.
Right. So we're getting, and but the journey to get there is actually this incredibly epic journey in in chapter 27.
This is steps.
It is, right. It's kind of like I've never heard a scholar make that equation, but there is kind of that feel to it. And you're right to kind of, like, there's this kind of epic Odysseus, like ancient hero quality of going on this great journey, this great voyage. Now that he has cast his lot to say, you could be a free man. You could be walking free. You could be down, you could be down there eating, having a Slurpee down at the 7-Eleven, nobody bothering you. You could just be living your life. But he has chosen to go to the emperor to bring him to Jesus. So there's this, like, he's a full volunteer in this journey.
Like
So
he's evangelized Greece and he's brought the Gentiles
right.
to the church. And so he's done that creation of the new form.
Right.
But now he's going for gold.
Yeah.
For gold.
Right.
He knows his end. He comes to the end of his life.
Right.
He's got to go for gold. Now's the time.
And exactly. And if God, if God has called him to evangelize the Gentiles, well, who's the number one Gentile?
But, yeah.
The emperor, exactly. Like, yeah, I'm supposed to. Well, like, you want me to evangelize the emperor? There's a number one guy in that hierarchy. I know who that is. I'll go see him.
I go
So
back to.
there you go.
But
This is a good
in
one.
the end, it begins to introduce Jesus to Rome, and after a couple of generations or whatever, Constantine does recognize.
Oh yes, yeah.
So
And
this is the beginning that has.
it is absolutely none of this. Right. This is all part of the growing. And again, it's another one of those. It continues to be a part of that story that every time the church is oppressed, it grows. Like every time it smacks down, little parts of it spatter to other places, and it begins to grow elsewhere. Like this is another piece of that. Yep. So it's about to set sail to the ports along the coast of Asia. So you see they're kind of which is the Turkey and Greece, basically, headed to Rome. We put out to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, the Macedonian from Thessalonica, and the next day we put in at Sidus. And Julius treated Paul kindly and allowed him to go to the friends to be cared for. So remember, Paul, again, he's been locked up by Festus for a couple of years. He's been writing letters like crazy. That's what made the Jews so mad at him. He'd become kind of this semi-rock star. So now they put in at Sidon, and there's a church there. Like do we? I mean, I don't remember when Paul went to Sidon. If it said he did, I don't think he necessarily has visited Sidon. If he did, it was a walkthrough. But they know him. Like he's got some street cred, and it's like he's going to go. So he says to Julius, Julius is like, oh yeah, you want your friends to come down and visit? Sure. So the church in Sidon comes down and have a little potluck with him.
Yeah, he's going to give Luke and the boys. Yeah.
Right, yeah, he's got Luke and the boys with him, and then they get the hospitality of the church, which is another thing about the church is every time, we have to remember, like, the number one thing of the number one difference of the church from the ancient world and the world that surrounds it is its hospitality. Like they go down and Paul is there and they're like, hey, come on, we're gonna have a potluck or we're gonna get together. Like there's this incredible hospitality, and that is the number one testament of the Christian life. Well, like, oh look, there's a baby with nobody to take care of it. We'll take care of it. Oh, look, there's an old woman with no one to take care of her. We'll take care of her. Like,
That's awesome.
that is the number one thing that differentiates the Christian church
The way.
in practice, and that is the way, exactly.
It was the Judaism too. It was the way of Judaism as well. Isn't that why?
Well,
The sort of the Samaritan.
yeah,
The norm would have been for a Jewish person to do what the Samaritans did, and that's the lesson of the story. That the Jews that are supposed to be doing this didn't
Yes.
care what the Samaritans did.
yes. No, you're absolutely right. Because that's the whole point. You're absolutely right. Because that's the whole point of the law. The whole point of the 620 whatever things they're supposed to be doing is to show them this is how you're supposed to be doing that. This is how you're supposed to be caring for the widows and orphans. This is how you're supposed to be doing all these things. But they're not doing it. You know.
This is the way the heart.
Exactly, and those actions are supposed to basically be containers for your heart to flow into. But not only is your heart not flowing into those containers, you're completely subverting what God's law. I mean, this is in many ways this is the purpose of the incarnation, is because they had the law, but they're not keeping the law. So you're absolutely right. Those seeds all exist within Judaism, but they've completely ignored them. And so, yeah.
So in Romans, that's when he dies.
Hmm?
In Romans.
He does die in Romans, yeah. So that's kind of the movie kind of picks up at the end of Romans. So, yeah, so. Okay.
I mean, I know they die. I don't
Yeah.
know how sad.
The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated to Paul kindly. Putting out to sea from Sidon, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. After we had sailed across the sea off of Sicily and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. So who else comes from Myra? Anybody know?
I don't remember.
Santa. St. Nicholas comes from Myra.
Stop it.
Yeah. So that's yeah. So there, the centurion found an Alexandrian ship bound for Italy. So notice this is kind of like catching a bus. Like they hire the ship that gets them all the way. So they made it to Myra. So now they have to find another ship.
Right.
And there, the centurion found an Alexandrian ship bound for Italy, and put us on board. And we sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus. And as the wind was set against us, we sailed under the lee of Crete off of Salamone. And sailing past it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of there's a great Chinese place there.
Isn't that east of New Bedford?
What's that? Yeah, right across the river from New Bedford. Yep.
There it is.
So yeah, but this
They
every
made it pretty far.
yeah, but here's the thing. Notice every time they keep saying, what's the winds doing?
Going like crazy.
They're against them.
Right.
Right. So what that means is they're already late in the season to be leaving from Rome, and so the winds are against them, and so now they've gotten themselves into a pickle where there's this question because where they're really too far late in the season to really be continuing on because the winds have shifted. But at the same time, here they are in Lycia, in Fair Havens, since much time and we know this because since much time had been lost sailing, because they were sailing against the wind, sailing was now dangerous, and because the fast had already gone by, Paul advised them. So the fast is Hanukkah. So consider basically the winter time. So we're in the middle of winter. Like rule number one, don't go sailing in winter. Okay, the big storms, bad seas,
Yep.
blowing in the wrong direction, from where the trades are going. But here they are. Paul advised them saying, "Men, I can see that the voyage will be with danger and with much heavy loss, not only in cargo in the ship, but also of our lives." But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said. And since the harbor was not suitable for spending the winter, the majority was in favor of putting to sea from there on a chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, where they could spend the winter. And it was a harbor in Crete facing southwest and northwest. So basically which is kind of hilarious to me. It's because you have this harbor that's a bad harbor called Fair Havens. So it's basically bad. It's basically marketing. They named it Fair Havens to say, like, hey, it's this great harbor. You should come here. And you show up and it's like, this is a horrible harbor. We can't spend the winter here. There's no protection for the ship. So it's kind of it's like how Iceland got called, how Greenland got called Greenland. It's like, come to Greenland. It's great. Like, it's not great.
It's not
It's not exactly icy like Iceland,
Yeah.
but
So nobody wants to spend the winter in Fair Havens, like for whatever reason. They feel like maybe they can get up a little further and they can get into this other place called Phoenix, and they can spend the winter there.
I had to take us up on another tangent about this stuff.
Yeah.
We saw this Fair Havens thing, which I bet Fair Haven named himself.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
There's also Padan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That is Padan Aram.
Yeah.
Which is where Abram came from.
Yes. Right. It's Abram.
So,
Yeah.
And all, Padan was very religious.
Yep.
Especially Quakers. There were a lot of religious Quakers in Dartmouth.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, that's why they named their place, and the money in Dartmouth, they paid
Yeah,
the
right.
money is.
Yeah.
Even the money from the
That was-
neighbors,
yeah, 'cause that's
they
where
owned
the-
all the whaling ships.
That's where the whaling.
They
Yeah.
really killed them,
So,
they
right.
killed the shit out of the whale,
Right.
and they made money.
Right.
So,
The Quakers
there's a
were.
little side to,
Yeah, the Quakers were the Quakers were most of the not most, but many of the whaling families were Quakers,
Right.
and so they would and so Padan Aram is named is named after Abraham's hometown. Yeah,
That's awesome.
so
sorry about that.
Don't be
no,
sorry.
no,
That's
yeah.
little tidbits of what did
but I
you
mean
know.
yeah, but the thing is I mean I think it's really important to bring up because it's we think these things are old and dead and it's like this big old musty book, but we say these names every day.
Yeah.
We live with these names every day. They have formed us and they have shaped us, and it's like we ignore that at our peril. You know what I mean? We ignore that at our peril.
Yeah.
But Paul has thrown it down. He's like, if we keep going, this is going to be a bad idea. He's like, we don't want to do this. We're going to lose the ship. We're going to lose the cargo. We might lose our lives. But nobody listened to him, and they listened to the pilot and the ship owner who didn't want to stay. Like basically, nobody wanted to stay in Fair Havens. I mean, I don't know why. Like it's I mean, it's got some nice restaurants.
Fair
Like,
Haven's a little
me
hidden-
some. I like me
It's a
some.
little hidden gem. It's a hidden gem. I like Fair Haven.
It is a gem.
Mike's is in
We
Fairhaven.
We actually tried to move to Fairhaven. We couldn't
Mike's
find a
in
place there.
Fairhaven, too.
What's that?
Mike's restaurant is in Fairhaven also.
What's
Oh, Mike's
Mike's.
is good. Yeah,
Just before you get to Marion.
that's a good restaurant.
It's
So-
on Route 6.
All right, so off they go, sailing into the winter. When a moderate south wind began to blow, they thought they could achieve their purpose, so they weighed anchor and began to sail past Crete, close to the shore. But soon a violent wind called a northeaster. Have you ever heard of a nor'easter?
Never.
Rushed down from Crete. So imagine, northeast, like you can see which way the wind's blowing. So right now, like they're never getting back to Crete, like right, because that's northeast.
It's going away from Rome.
It's blowing away. It's blowing away from Crete for sure.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
what they're trying to do is trying to get around the corner on Crete. They're trying to stay on Crete. They're trying to get around the corner to a good harbor where they can spend the
Going back where
winter,
they came from.
and they can and there's because it's part of it is like the text doesn't say it, but you can kind of read into it. It's like nobody wants to spend the winter in Fairhaven. So Fairhaven is just a crappy place. Like it probably doesn't have good food. It probably doesn't have good lodging. It probably like you're gonna spend 3 months someplace if they're gonna wait for the winter storms to blow by. It's like, man, I'm gonna spend 3 months eating nothing but like goat and meal in a cold hot like I'll take my chances in the
Right.
ocean. You know, like they're you know, these are people who are kind of accustomed to a certain lifestyle,
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, the wind's changed a little bit. I think we can zip around the corner, because that's all they really want to do is they want to zip around the corner of Crete so they can get into a better place to hole up for the. They're not really trying to make Rome.
Right.
They're just trying to find a better place to stay because. But they get out to sea, and then the nor'easter comes in, which is it's blowing just right that way. So which basically it's blowing right off of shore for Crete. It's blowing them away from Crete almost immediately.
So these are sailing ships.
Right. Oh yeah.
So it's not like they have an engine.
They got no engines. They
Depending upon the wind.
a couple of oars, but nothing that's going to get them anywhere. So since the ship was caught and could not be turned head up, but soon a violent wind called a nor'easter rushed down from Crete. Since the ship was caught and could not be turned head on into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven. So they're just basically what we call sailing on sticks. Like they have no sail up. They're just running with the wind, hoping that everything holds on. By running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were able to get the ship's boat under control. After hoisting it up, they took measures to undergird the ship, and then, fearing that they would run on to Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor, and so were driven. So they basically. They put the ship's boat down. They laid out a sea anchor, so they're going to try and kind of hang out in this little place before they get driven onto the rocks. So we were being pounded by the storm so violently that on the next day we began to throw cargo overboard. And on the third day, with their own hands, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. So this is all the extra rigging, all the extra stuff. So Syrtis is basically this big sandbar. So they've got the sea anchor out and their sandbar, and so and the ship's taking on water. It's getting battered. They've got the sea anchor out, but they're getting kind of slowly dragged towards the sandbar, and it'd make a great movie, wouldn't it? I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For last night there stood by me an angel of God, to whom I. All right, wait a minute. Let me go back. Sorry, I skipped ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry. So when we're at 19, right? So on the third day, with their own hands, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. And when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, no small tempest raged. All hope of our being saved was last abandoned. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me." So Paul, not above saying, "I told you so." But the thing is there's a reason he's saying, "I told you so," because what he's doing is saying, "I told you this was going to go badly, so I have some credibility."
Right.
He's not just saying, "I told you so." He's saying, remember I know what's happening.
I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
I have some metaphysical insight that you all don't have. And I've already showed you that. And so not to set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided the damage and loss. I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For last night there stood before me an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before the emperor, and indeed God has granted me safety to all those who are sailing with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we will have to run aground on some island." So again,
What happened in a couple verses earlier, I did a lot of reading about the Patrick O'Brien novels, which is about the British Navy.
mhm,
And so you get to understand that those sailing ships, if you hit a rock, they could pass a sail underneath the ship to stop the water from coming in.
yep,
It didn't completely bind the hull,
Right.
But it stopped the water from rushing in.
Right.
And it was a way to save the ship, and that's what they were doing.
Right.
In preparation for this,
Right.
they passed a sail like underneath the ship to get it prepared in case
Right.
the same or hit rocks. And so that's part of what maybe saves them here, because the ship didn't like break up. It allowed them to safely travel from what happened to the ship to land.
Yeah, they're pulling out all the stops to try and keep the boat. Right, they're using all the tricks. Exactly.
The ship was gone.
Oh yeah,
But-
yeah.
but again-
That's not just a.
But no, that's right.
Yeah.
And maybe part of this is all about adding to Paul's credibility,
Right.
because he's able to say this, and you're right. Probably God. It probably was God. Maybe God told him to put this ashes underneath the ship, to tell him, all the things you need to do to make sure that you guys survive.
Right.
But you're right. It is God in the end.
Well, and that's the
I'll
whole
upon that.
that's the whole thing. We've been pointing to it for 27 chapters now. That who's the real actor in the book of Acts?
Right.
It's the Holy Spirit.
Right.
That every time, when Peter's in jail, well, who shows up? There's an angel that breaks and gives it a jailbreak. That when the apostles are about are in despair in the upper room, what shows up? The Holy Spirit blows over them and gives them courage to go out and every one of them except for John to be martyred in the pursuit of the gospel. Like again and again and again, we see we think this is the action. The story is the Acts of the Apostles, but really it's the acts of the Holy Spirit in which the apostles participate.
Yeah.
Right.
That's really
Yeah.
what the story is.
Right.
And that again at this clutch moment, what do we have? We have an angel show up and say,
I got you.
I got you. Exactly. I got you. It's like, this is what's going to happen. So,
Now you just put my mind back to the right place.
yeah.
You're so cute. I did.
So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith that God, that will be exactly as we've been told. But we're going to run around somewhere. And when the 14th night had come, as we were drifting across the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. So they took soundings and found 20 fathoms. So they're basically throwing a lead out. The lead goes to the bottom. They measure how much string there is, and so they're taking soundings as they're being dragged across the Adriatic, because they can start to hear the sea sound different than it does.
Right.
Fearing that we might run onto the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for the day to come. So it's the middle of the night. They can hear the waves crashing on rocks, but the bottom is getting the sea is getting more shallow. Like this does not bode well. So they throw out all the anchors that they have from the stern, and they're hoping they're going to hang there until they can get some light and see where they're going. But when the sailors tried to escape from the ship, fearing that they might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. But when sailors tried to escape from the ship and had lowered down the boat into the sea on the pretext of putting out the anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved." And then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the boat and set it adrift.
Because the ship had a lifeboat.
So this
The
is
ship had a lifeboat. These guys want to give them a lifeboat to save themselves.
Yeah, so this is the ship's boat. So there's basically a little tender boat that they have for the little rowboat that they have to go around and set anchors. And they're like, the sailors were like, "Don't worry, we'll go set out the other anchors." But Paul knows they're lying, and what they're really going to do is leave them and run for the shore. And so notice that they've got confidence in Paul now, because Paul says, if those guys escape, we're all doomed. Well, none of us are going to make it. And so what did they do is they put these 4 anchors out that are hanging from the stern of the ship, and they cut the lines on those anchors and they let the ship run. So basically they're taking Paul's word that says he says if they leave, we don't make it. And so the centurion and all the people in there are like, well, he says if they leave, we don't make it, so we're going to listen to him. So they cut the
lifeboat. They set the lifeboat off. The soldiers cut the ropes. They held the lifeboat and let it fall away. So they let the lifeboat go, and they remained on board the ship. I think is what they're saying. It's saying here in 32.
Yeah, no, So it's the ship itself, I think.
All
So
right, let's see what happens when I go forward. That's all right. I don't need
yeah,
I have sit that held the lifeboat.
That's all right. Let's keep reading.
yeah,
'Cause
All I know is that
there-
when you were talking about those little lead things,
Yeah.
I kept thinking about my father's Loran and how far technology is.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
And we used to do soundings.
Yeah.
And that's what they call about the ropes. Like every 7 feet or something, they had a knot in the rope. That's how they knew knots. That's what we're talking about. All this nautical terminology.
So,
33.
We're
so
almost
just
there.
before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food, saying, "Today is the 14th day that you have been in suspense and remaining without food, having eaten nothing." So they've been on basically kind of ship's rations. So they've had a little tiny bit to eat, but they've been basically storing the food so that they can survive. "Therefore I urge you, take some food, for it will help you survive. For none of them will lose a hair on your heads." And after he had said this, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. So what does that sound like?
Yeah, the communion.
Yes, exactly. So
Sounds
there's
like you.
there's this, and then all of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. There were all 276 persons on the ship. So again, this is no small vessel.
Yeah.
After they had satisfied their hunger, they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the sea. So they're like, "This is it. We're at the end. We're going to lighten the ship all we can." In the morning, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach on it, and they planned to run the ship ashore if they could. So they cast off the anchors and left them to sea. Right. They cut loose the. You're right. They cut loose the boat
Lifeboat.
and didn't let the sailors escape.
Right.
So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea. And at the same time, they loosened the ropes.
Untied the ropes that held the rudders.
What's that?
It said they untied the ropes that held the rudders. Posted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach.
Right.
I don't know why they would take away the control, but they're saying they did. They said the ship struck the sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast, it wouldn't move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. So now they're shipwrecked, but close enough, I guess, we can get to land and survive, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Where did my other page go?
Verse 42 is
Is
next.
that my Bible?
Oh, sorry, you put your notes?
Yeah, where'd my other notes go? Oh, I'll grab mine. So here we are in this, the super exciting place. The ship is running. They're going to run it aground. They've got the
27:42. This is after they run
39.
around.
Okay.
And the ship is
So
breaking
in the
up.
morning, so 39. In the morning, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach, and on it which they planned to run the ship ashore, if they could. So they cast off the anchors, left them on the sea, and at the same time they loosened the ropes that tied to the steering oars, and then hoisted the foresail to the wind, and they made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the ship aground. The bow struck the remaining and remained immovable, but the stern was being broken up by the force of the waves. So basically, the ship is stuck on the reef, so it's up there, and it's basically kind of breaking the ship in half. So it's kind of sawing the ship in half it's breaking the stern apart. They remained immovable. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none might swim away and escape. So here's the thing: you're a Roman guard. You've been given a prisoner. What happens if you lose the prisoner?
You're dead.
You're dead, right? So it's better. So this is a them protecting themselves movement. Like if the prisoner escapes, they die. They die because they. But it's a shipwreck. Like they died.
Right.
Like that. Like here's his body. They can say I didn't lose my prisoner.
Right.
Like, he didn't, may not have, but the centurion, wishing to save Paul, kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, and the rest of them followed on some planks and other pieces of the ship. And so it was that all were brought to safety to land. So here is Paul having made this incredible prediction. None of you are going to die if you stick with me, and you stick with what, where did it come from? Where did it come from?
Holy Spirit.
From the Holy Spirit. If you listen to the Holy Spirit, you will not die. And this is kind of the hammer stroke of the entire book of Acts,
Right.
that we come back to again and again and again. If we listen to the Spirit, things are going to work out. If we don't listen to the Spirit, things aren't going to work out. And that's again and again and again kind of the lesson of the early church, and the lesson of the church that we continue to today. So it's one of these moments of kind of a reminder for we as the church, that this story, the reason this story, and we'll probably end it next week, either next week or the week after, depending on when we actually can get together. But we'll figure it out. But the reason the story abruptly ends, you'll notice, like, we have one more chapter and there's almost no resolution here.
Right.
So
I was just thinking that in my head. Why did it go to Romans?
because there's been a lot of commentary on this, and a lot of kind of scholarly thought about this, and the reason is that this is an intentional decision by Luke and by the early writers, that the book of Acts ends abruptly because this is the story of the church that has gone on, and that the story of the church that has gone on picks up at the end of Acts with you. So that the reason the story is not ended is because the story has not ended. That we as the church today, and that Christians for 2,000 years that have been reading the book of Acts, we place ourselves at the end of this unfinished story because we are the unfinished story.
Right, and if they told the story of Paul's death, it might almost seem like the end.
Right, exactly.
And the funny thing is, the next book is Romans.
Right.
The next book is Paul's letter to the Romans.
Right.
So I find that pretty cool.
Yes, right. So, right. And it's Paul's letter to the Romans written from jail. He's not going to, yeah. So,
Right.
so there's,
If they find him guilty, I read a little bit.
yeah. So,
Two of my favorite New Testament books outside of the Gospels is Romans and I can't remember. My memories are crappy today. It's the story to the Jews. It's the
Hebrews.
It's the case of Jesus to the Jews.
Yes.
So Hebrews. So
Yeah.
Romans and Hebrews.
Yeah.
My two favorite.
Hebrews is some of the most beautiful stuff. So yeah, so we'll so the next time we meet, I think it's going to be next week, but I'll make sure we lock that in. We will take on chapter 28. So and if we do, we will. If it is that, we will plan on chapter 28, and we will plan on dinner. So
That's right.
so I will be in touch with you in text, and what we want to eat, we'll bring in dinner.
Yeah, we'll potluck it.
We can potluck it if you want. I was going to get dinner, but
Oh, I don't. It's up to you.
we
Brian.
can talk about it. Well, we can
do
talk
a
about it in
chili
text.
cook-off.
What's that? Chili cook-off. Oh, somebody's throwing down now. Ah,
Ooh.
I see. All right, but okay. So we'll pick it up next week with 28.
And I'll see if Christine